Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of 10 Ton Hammer Talks. Today we are going to be talking about fair play. The episode is obviously titled Leveling the Playing Field, so we're going to be talking about what fair play means, some kind of big changes coming in the MOBA environment, and what that might mean for League of Legends, other games, and a lot more. So I'll go ahead and pass it to Jeremy, and he can tell you a little bit about the show, and I'll get us set here.
Alright, so first, as we do every week, we have to give a big shout out to the great people at 1010 Hammer who allow us to do this, among other things, and have a job and all that. So yeah, if you enjoy the show, or even if you think the show's just okay, definitely please check out 10tonhammer.com for all of your online gaming needs. I know it's going to sound like an advertisement. But seriously, we have a lot of guides, features, news, opinion articles, all sort of interviews, all sorts of good stuff. So seriously, check out 10tonhammer.com. They enable us to do what we do, and hopefully keep doing it for a long time.
Yeah. And also, too, us doing this on the Twitch format, we could be just doing this on YouTube or whatever, but we prefer Twitch because we can have an audience interacting, asking us questions, kind of pushing the topic in a new direction, or going deeper into it, that whatever matters to you, the viewers. So definitely drop us questions in the chat. We'll grab those up and we'll ask them right in the middle of the show if it's really relevant at the time, or we'll wait till the end and ask them in sort of an audience Q&A session. So just throw us whatever questions you guys might have or be interested in when we're talking about our topic, and we'll try and answer it the best we can and dive into that issue. So thanks for joining us. And Jeremy has kind of the topic set out for today. He wrote an article on 10 Ton Hammer. I believe it should be going up there soon, but we're going to get to dive into it a little bit. So I'll pass it to Jeremy, and you can tell us a little bit about what this is that you want to talk about today.
Yeah, the article's actually not up yet, so you guys can get kind of a sneak peek. So basically, as anyone who follows the League of Legends scene probably knows, and if you don't, here's what's going on. The servers have been located in the Pacific Northwest for quite some time now, which has meant that West Coast players have had a very good connection with very low ping, whereas anyone from central United States eastward, or not just the US I should say, but all North America, central and eastwards, have had, let's say, not so great ping. And it creates a pretty large disparity between what a player on the West Coast experiences when they play League of Legends and what a player on the East Coast experiences. You're talking the difference of literally between, say, 20 ping to 120 or higher. It's a pretty huge difference. So what Riot Games is doing to try to help out the players that don't happen to live on the West Coast, which is actually the majority of the player base, is they're sometime in the very near future, actually, going to be migrating the servers over to Chicago, Illinois, which A, creates a more central location, and B, is that Chicago is actually one of the best connected cities in the US. So it also helps with their other half of that project, which is working with ISPs all across North America to create a more direct route from the player to Riot Games servers. So between those two things, they're aiming to get all players in North America under 80 ping. Obviously, West Coast players' ping will go up, but should still be under 80, and everyone should be under 80. That's their goal. So the point here is that all of the player base should now be on a much more stable connection, and it should now be much more even across the continent, not, differences, huge differences in ping from one place to another. We should all be relatively close to each other. Obviously, there will still be differences, as, someone, say, living in Chicago will have, much better ping than, someone, on either coast, but it should be much more even across the board. So that's the premise of what Riot is doing. For the majority of the player base, this will be somewhere between a neutral to positive change in the quality of their connection. Sounds great. There's one problem. which is that the pros, the people who play this game professionally for a living, have to live in California because that's where the LCS studios are. That's where they compete every week. So they're not going to be living anywhere besides that because, traveling from, in this case, let's say Chicago to California every week, be a bit expensive. So now you have the pros living in California who have been used to playing on, say, 20 ping. Now their ping is going to go up to, say, let's just say around 60 or so, which isn't bad. And that's not really the problem. The problem isn't that they're going to 60 ping. The problem is, and I mentioned in the article, and I think it was said best by Team Liquid's jungler I Will Dominate, who said that it's not a matter of the ping going up, because people adjust to their ping. You can play on 100 ping and still be very good at the game because you get used to it. So you adjust your reaction time, you react to skill shots slightly differently. It's not necessarily ideal, but you can do it. So that's not the problem. The problem is that you have to adjust to it. You have to get used to it. So if they get used to playing on 60 ping, but then each week they have to go to the studio to compete on a LAN environment, which should ideally, have 0 ping since it's, local network. It's a very big difference between those two things. Whereas the difference between playing on LAN and playing on, say, 20 ping is not much of a difference. So their practice environment almost exactly mirrors the actual competitive environment. It would be like, let's say, a professional baseball team that has to practice on a little league field in a park with different dimensions and a shorter distance, let's say, from the pitcher's mound to the home plate, and then have to go play their games in a major league ballpark. Practice does not mirror the actual competitive environment. So what the topic for discussion really is today is the server move overall benefits most of the player base. However, it creates a very uneven and potentially destructive environment for the professionals, that maintain our esports scene. So our real main topic for today, and I'm going to let Alex get it here so that it's not just, me spouting off the whole time, is basically the good of the many, which is the player base, versus the good of the few, which is the pros, but the pros are who fuel the entire esports team.
So anybody that is familiar with me from other past discussions on this show or many other shows that I've been doing, I like to find a good harmony when I can, and I do like the fact that they're moving and trying to create some equality for the whole player base, so everybody's pretty much playing on the same ping. If you're anywhere near a major city, you should be, connected in at less than 100 ping with the new move, no matter where you're at in the US. So I like that, but also at the same time, a lot of what drives even the general player base to play is, this idea that they're, improving, maybe they're climbing the ladders. A lot of people play ranked. Like, it's something that, watching the esports is a lot of the fun of the game and actually enhances a regular player's playing experience, because every time you pull off an epic move or something, an epic combo, you make a great play. It's just really fun, and having that competitive scene in the esports that really emphasizes that, it only enhances the player's experience, even if the average player doesn't watch every LCS tournament or something like that. But anyhow, I guess the point I'm getting at here is I really like the move, but they need to find a way to make it better for the professional players as well, which, I think I remember reading you suggested, Jeremy, of doing like an East-West server, kind of like StarCraft had back in the day, when they had competitive play on the StarCraft, original StarCraft. And I think that would be good. The other solution I think would be to move the LCS studios to Chicago, and then they'd be kind of doing the same thing. So I could see that being another alternative solution. But
yeah, the thing with that is they've actually straight up come out and said that they are not moving the LCS studios. That has already been completely shot down. And as you mentioned, I did bring up the idea of separate servers for the East and West North America. As you mentioned, it has been done before with other companies. Riot themselves even do it. Europe is split into Europe, Northeast and Europe West. They have 2 separate servers. It's not a perfect solution. It does present the problem of, if I'm playing with my friends right now and they live on the West Coast, and now we have 2 different servers, I'm not going to be playing with my friends anymore, right? So that's a problem. So I will say that as someone who plays on the East Coast with approximately 130 ping, I am, for myself, very excited about this move. It's going to be a whole new experience for me. It's going to be great. The issue is that you have people that actually get into the game now because they started watching LCS or any of the major regions. Like, I've actually seen stories on Reddit of, I wasn't really interested in this game, and not just for League, for other games too, but I started watching the competitive scene. I watched these pro players play and I was like, oh wow, that is awesome. And then I started playing this game. So the pro scene is actually very important for the continued growth of the game. Again, if you bring back the analogy of traditional sports, how many people are into it because they get to watch professional players play? It's actually pretty big, and as time goes on, the professional scene continues to develop, that's just going to happen more and more. So we can't really ignore the pro scene, but we also can't ignore the fact that without a player base, the pro scene doesn't exist. So we do have to accommodate the majority of players as well. So as I mentioned in the article, it is a really symbiotic relationship between the two. One side really does need the other. And so it really creates that question of how do we handle it. So as I said, my solution, and I'm certainly, if you guys have any other ideas, I definitely want to hear them. But my solution was just simply 2 servers from North America. Again, it's not perfect, but you need to be able to support both the general player base and the pro scene. They both have to be healthy.
Yeah, I agree that they're both equally important to the success of the game, and it is something that has to be addressed for the main player base too, because I remember having lived in Colorado and out in California for a year and seeing the extreme difference in playing that game, throughout the duration of all my moves. Like, it was a big difference between playing on like 25 ping and playing on 85 in Denver. So it was pretty interesting to see how the game was kind of a different experience when everything is sharper. Really, there's not that delay. And I actually have a brother who lived out in the boonies, and he played pretty much on 300 something ping solid. So that was interesting to see too. So I think it's on a game like this where it's really reliant on skill-based decisions, twitch reaction. You've gotta have low ping, so providing that for both, professional players that are driving the game and then the general player base that's experiencing the game. They've got to find a solution, and it doesn't seem like the move to Chicago is a complete solution yet. Maybe it's one step in the right direction, and but they're going to need another additional step to support the professional scene. Although I guess on the counterpoint I might add to that is the professional players, if they are truly, the best of the best, having to adjust for the ping, change between tournaments and stuff might be an interesting element of, who can really, who are the top players really that can, they're so good at the game, they can adjust to these different things. So I think that is the only counterpoint I would give to it, although I definitely agree that a more perfect solution would be to either move the studio or split east-west, one of the two, something to provide even ping or a more stable ping for the professional players while also catering to the larger majority.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, it's just it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have your practice environment be vastly different than the way you're actually playing your competitive matches. There's no other sport, let's say, that really does that. It's always even. I'll even again bring up a lot of baseball teams, when they do spring training, right, which is, preparing for the season, they don't do spring training in their actual stadiums. They have separate stadiums because they want it, because it's usually, February or March. So they want it in a warmer environment. So they'll usually do it in, say, Arizona or Florida. A lot of teams will still build their spring training facilities while they're not big stadiums, because they don't expect large crowds. They still try to build them to the same dimensions as their home stadium, so that even in that environment, it's a completely separate thing. Players are still practicing in the same general environment that they're going to be playing their actual professional matches in. It's just that important. So as you mentioned, a difference of even, let's say, 40, 45 ping, it's not the end of the world, no. But it is different, and you do have to play differently. So it just doesn't make sense to try to force pros to have to constantly shift back and forth. I don't think that's a skill thing. I think that's just, as I said, understanding the importance of practice environment mirroring competitive environment.
So I have another interesting question then about this. Has any other MOBA creator, has this been a concern yet, or is League kind of the first one to really address, like, hey, we want ping to be good for all players and managing, professional play and a studio environment as well?
I can't say for sure. I believe this is the first time, just because this is the first I've heard of, actual MOBA game servers moving for the sake of the overall player base. So this is the first, I think, major time I've seen where it's really come up as a concern for the pro scene. Again, I can't say that with 100% certainty, but it's the first time that I've seen it. So I think that's why it's generating such
a buzz,
such strong controversy. Yeah, because you have all the pros coming out and pretty much laughing like, "You've got to be kidding me," kind of thing. Some are just making jokes on Twitter. Some, like Dominator, coming out and really explaining why exactly people are so upset about it. But there's no question that this is a big disruption to the pro scene. That part isn't up for debate. Whether you care about that or not, whether you think it's actually important or not, that can be debated all day. But the fact that it will disrupt the pro scene is a fact. Like, that is just the way it is. So as far as I know, I believe it's the first time really having this kind of discussion, in this context.
Well, it's interesting because it really stays in line with Riot's kind of stance on being a studio that tries to cater towards their players as best that they possibly can, and this seems like a move definitely in line with that. And kind of to the point you were saying, like, the question is kind of whether we care about the professional scene, or it obviously is going to affect them, but it's whether or not we care. And I think I would kind of think that the majority of players are not going to be affected by current players to be affected by the LCS guys being unhappy. So I can kind of see why Riot would definitely move that way. It's kind of true to their nature of trying to appease their general population of fans, and make moves that are going to be I guess, for the betterment of the whole future of the game. So I would wager that this is not the entire full solution to the problem, but maybe the first step that they can take right now. Just given Riot's track record of continually trying to improve upon things and refine things. I mean, they've updated their UI, more than EverQuest has updated its UI, and it's been around for like 15 years. So I definitely think that they will be taking more steps, but for the near future, it will definitely be some unrest in the pro scene. Sounds like it should be interesting to see the next few tournaments after the move, where commentators, if they'll be attributing, or players will be attributing any losses or mistimed things to ping. We'll see how much it affects the play itself. That'll be the most intriguing part to watch, I think.
Yeah.
So, but we're talking about one game specifically, but I was kind of thinking about this idea of fair play, creating a level playing field, because really the idea is, at least from my reasoning, is matchmaking, you have people that are being match made from east to west coast because North America is one server. So leveling the playing field, they are trying to do that because you are going to get matched with people that may have significantly better ping than you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So leveling that out is kind of a big difference because, you know, this is a competitive game, and there are a lot of other games out there that rely on the competitive aspects of the game, and it's never fun to be like losing 9-10 games in a row in League or any other MOBA. So taking out as many factors that can weigh into that, I think is definitely important. So I'm kind of wondering, you know, what other MOBAs out there would be benefited from, you know, this type of a move. I'd like to think almost all of them. I imagine Blizzard is, you know, as big as they are, probably going to have East-West servers, because I kind of feel like over the course of their history they've done that with every competitive environment they've had. But I don't know. It should be interesting to see. I kind of want to look up Heroes of the Storm and see what their server status is, where they are hosting servers out of.
Well, that's actually the interesting part, is that Blizzard used to split up, you know, U.S. East, U.S. West, and then they stopped. So I wonder if they decided that it wasn't worth it. Because as you mentioned, for a long time they did, and not even just for competitive games, like for anywhere, any games. Like I even used to, you know, back in the day, you know, Diablo 2, you know, you still had to pick, you know, East or West.
Well, there was some PvP in that, and then also like World of Warcraft was also split a little bit, and that was, you know, also has some PvP elements to it, but. Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as I know, I believe the Heroes of the Storm servers are in California. I could be mistaken though, but I believe they are, which is not surprising because I think most, you know, companies seem to gravitate there. So again, it does, and at least based on my personal experiences, what I've gone through, it certainly feels like they're on the West Coast. So. I think it is. So it really does beg the question then, you know, what caused Blizzard to switch away from, you know, using the two separate servers to deciding to just go to one, you know, for their games. And it could just very well just be cost efficiency, because obviously it's going to cost more to, you know, maintain, you know, two sets of servers rather than one. But is that cost efficiency going to pay off, or is it the kind of thing that's going to discourage enough players from playing your game that you're going to suffer for it?
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. If it becomes enough of a nuisance with the professional players, you know, you might see a lot of players kind of burning out on the professional scene quicker than they normally do, and, you know, that might drive down the overall enthusiasm for people being excited about the game. I think there's definitely something to be said for kind of a collective awareness or a collective feeling about, you know, it's just the perception people have of the game, the, you know, word of mouth you hear from friends, all of that gets built up by, you know, what people are seeing, and this is the most public aspect of the game, I would say, is the professional esports scene. So
yeah, absolutely.
Well, the other topic that I kind of had here, building off of the discussion of fair play, and this is something that's really intriguing, because what we have here is, we're talking about it in the context of competitive games, but in the context of non-competitive games, a lot of, I mean, I'd say the majority of MMOs in their traditional model have competitive elements. Even the PvE servers and stuff like that, people are competing for like world first and stuff like that. So I think there's a competitive nature to it. But it's intriguing to me because, bringing up fair play this week, last week we did, if you guys didn't get to see our last episode, you can check it out in the replays here or on YouTube, but we had a special guest from Revival, a developer, on, and that's an interesting game because one of the kind of elements of that, and there are other games out there, not just Revival, but there's some other ones, Saga of Leucemia, Pantheon, Rise of the Fall. There's quite a few, but these new MMOs are kind of trying to embrace some of the idea of non-fair gameplay where, you know, it might not be necessarily fair for everyone. Like, the model that World of Warcraft kind of tries to present is, hey, everybody has an equal chance to do this. You know, even if you're a solo player not playing in a group, you can still get the same things. You know, this is kind of a, you know, they make a fair playing field. Whereas some of these new MMOs that are being developed, that's not something they're interested in. Some games, like Saga of Leucemia, has specifically come out and said, we are not going to support solo play. Like, they're going to have things you can do solo, but you're not going to be able to do the things that everybody else can do, because their game wants to emphasize group play. So it's kind of interesting because it kind of brings up the concept of fair play in general. When is it applicable? When is it not? Obviously, you know, real life is not fair. People have different circumstances. So, you know, and in a MMO type, you know, a real world emulation type thing, adding some of that unfairness to the game actually emulates a better world, a more believable world, and a more immersive experience. But how much do you allow in before it becomes a painful experience for some? Or, you know, it's definitely a tricky balance if, you know, you're in the position of balancing it rather than just trying to achieve fair play at all times. So that was kind of, so I guess the topic really is what kind of experience would unfair play be okay in is really kind of the topic up for discussion that I was kind of thinking. And I know, Jeremy, you're more in the realm of competitive gaming and stuff, but you've also dabbled in MMOs a little bit. But sure, even MMOs out of the question. It could be any type of game, general gaming, you know. When would you see unfair gameplay as sort of a beneficial element of the game?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, you know, talking to Snipe Hunter from Revival last week, there's definitely room for it in the MMO space. Because people consume any given MMO so differently from user to user, it almost makes sense, actually, that there is some level of imbalance there. And even within competitive titles, there is a level of imbalance. Say, not all champions of League of Legends are going to be as good. So if you go ahead and play a champion who's just straight up not as good right now as someone else, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. The difference there is that you have the choice, you know, of how fair do I want the game to be. Do I want to just, you know, pick a champion that isn't that great because I like them, or do I want to pick a champion that I know is very strong right now, you know, the current metagame? So, you know, that's a way to look at it. But I think in MMOs, it makes a lot more sense. It really depends on the genre. Any game that is supposed to have a, say, competitive / professional scene, I think having overall balance to the game is important, because you should not be giving, you know, unfair advantages just because to one side or the other, because that doesn't create a good playing or viewing experience. But as I said, for a game like an MMO where people, when you have to compare, let's say when you're playing League, right, whatever you do whenever else you're playing, right now, in whatever game mode you're choosing to play, you have two teams that are starting from the same circumstances every time. That's balance. With an MMO, there's no, you start now and finish now for the same, you know, for all players. Everyone's starting at different times, everyone's doing different things. So having that evolving world where things are a little bit unfair, and it really is up to you to decide how you want to play the game, that makes a lot more sense, and I think there's actually a lot of value to that. So it really depends on what kind of game you're playing. So I said, anything that's has a pro scene, that has to be competitive, that has two teams or two sides agreeing on a starting time and a victory condition, there does need to be balance there. But something where people can log in wherever they want, that, you know, there's always different things going on, that different people are doing different things, that it makes sense to have the imbalance for.
See, one thing that's always intrigued me, specifically talking about fair play and the ability of, you know, conditions to exist that makes it unfair for one player as opposed to another, because there is some type of, there are levels of complexity to, you know, where the unfairness is, and if it is actually an equal unfairness provided to all players, therefore being fair. So, because I think of trading card games, you know, whether it's Magic, the Gathering, even Hearthstone, you have the RNG of deck draw. You know, like you're drawing and there's some amount of randomness to what you're going to be getting. So, you know, I can't count the number of games I've played of Magic where, you know, you just happen to get like mana screwed and you don't get any lands, you have no, and I see that Hearthstone actually attempted to correct that by providing, you know, the turn-based, hey, you get this much every turn, and so really the RNG only goes down to the deck build itself, which, you know, that, I think that mitigates a lot of what people would call unfair RNG, because you get to actually build the deck, you know, to kind of have the chances of draw that you would expect without the, you know, percentage of just total downside you get with Magic. So
right. Well, I mean, I'll build off that, because I'll say that Hearthstone did actually kind of work on that, although Hearthstone introduces a lot of RNG just through card effects. But to your point, it's both players on the same playing field. You know, there might be some randomness to it, and, you know, there might be some, well, someone just gets really lucky, but both players are accepting the conditions and stepping onto that playing field that will affect them both equally. Mm-hmm. It's not as if the system decides before the game starts, hey, any random effect for player A, I'm going to give them the best possible result, and any random effect for player B, I'm going to give them the worst possible result, and, you know, just deal with it. That's not what's happening. If that was the case, then you have a problem. But even when there's randomness involved, if it's the same randomness for both sides, then it still should be considered quote-unquote fair. On one particular play, you might say, oh my god, I can't believe how lucky he just got, you know, that completely changed the game. Maybe one time, sure. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, it is the same set of conditions for both sides. And I think that's what really matters in any competitive game, is that if both players want to play, they're accepting any randomness that might be part of it, and it should, over time, affect them both equally.
See, and I think that that's a model that Revival is pursuing in the idea of overall, people are going to get affected equally, whereas a game like Saga of Leucemia, which we haven't really discussed yet on this show, but their goal is really to emphasize group play. So because they want to make a game of group play, they're definitely not going to... and to me, I think it really kind of goes more in the realm of a past episode we had of, you know, niche gameplay, of, you know, answering a niche audience by saying, hey, you know, this is the type of game we want to make, and we're going to make it for this audience, and anybody else that wants to play a different way, you know, you're going to be kind of SOL for that particular game, which, you know, is interesting, because with MMOs, you know, kind of the way World of Warcraft dominated, and some of the other, especially the Eastern games, Lineage, and some of those, like, it just became this idea of, like, let's attract the biggest audience possible. This can only make the game better, when, you know, those games really only have servers of about 3,000 to 4,000 people max. So, you know, it's not like those games necessarily, having more people isn't necessarily better, other than maybe they can do more in development and stuff like that. But it's kind of interesting to me. I don't know, just an interesting topic of fairness, and, you know, what's fair in the inside of the game, and then on a meta discussion, what's fair as far as appealing to different players, because, you know, there's definitely, I think there's definitely something to be said about, you know, if you push for fairness too much, you're definitely going to be ostracizing, you know, people that, or I mean, you're going to be degrading the value of your game. Like, if, I don't know, if Hearthstone was like, oh, well, you want to get rid of, you know, these different variables because it makes it unfair at times for people, you know, it might degrade that kind of unexpected thrill of, what am I going to get on my next draw type. And I think that that's something that's happened in the MMO scene. But yeah, that was just a topic I was thinking of. It's just, I don't know, just interesting to me, and it's not something you really run into with MOBAs. MOBAs, you know, generally you have the unexpected nature of the game. I think, though, you know, if you're trying too hard to make things equal, you're going to run into the situation of balancing champions. You know, I think that's always a big issue of fair play in the context of an MMO. I mean, of a MOBA, is balancing your champions and heroes and trying to make sure that, you know, no one is more OP than another, or that they always have a counter option. So
right. Yeah, I mean, also when you make things too quote unquote fair, you almost remove the level of challenge. You know, sometimes you have to overcome it. If my opponent gets really lucky on this one turn, you know, if I can still win that game, it feels that much better because I have that one turn where I say, you know what, I outplayed you, but you got really lucky anyway, and I still beat you. You know, there's that level of excitement, and also, and this is a topic maybe that we shouldn't completely do now because this could go for a long time, but there is the topic of perfect imbalance in game design, which that thing shouldn't be completely balanced because an imbalance allows the game to constantly evolve. It's what allows a new player to come in and at least have a chance against a better player, an experienced player. You know, they should lose 90% of the time, but there's a 10% where maybe they will get lucky, you know, and that's what keeps them playing the game. Is that one time out of 10 where they say, oh my god, I actually beat this guy, I might be good at this game, and then they'll keep playing. Whereas if things are perfectly balanced, if, let's say in Hearthstone, I have this great, you know, tier 1 deck, you know, that should win against other tier 1 decks, and then someone comes in that has, you know, only the starting cards, if the game is perfectly balanced, they can never beat me, ever. Mm-hmm. So that's a problem. So the imbalance is what creates that little bit of uncertainty, and it's just enough to get new players into the game without being so much that every game is a coin flip. Definitely. And that's actually really important in that kind of game design.
Yeah, there's a video group I like to watch. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, Extra Credits on YouTube. Sure. Yeah, they have a great episode on imperfect balance or you said the exact thing that's the title.
Yeah, perfect imbalance.
Yeah, perfect imbalance. So, and it's really cool because they actually use MOBAs to explain that with the idea that, you know, MOBAs are full of OP, you know, champions. It's just that every OP champion has a counter or has a way that a team can play against that particular champion to beat them when, you know, a champion's abilities may just be ridiculous in a one-on-one situation against another champion. So it's kind of an interesting discussion that definitely I think we should have for another episode, possibly next week maybe. We'll see about our guest, which guest we have on next week. But yeah, and as far as future episodes go, we're definitely looking to have the audience, you know, audience questions going on, and we will be having guests. I'm going to have a guest next week for sure, so it's going to be a mystery guest. I'll leave it up in the air, but
excited.
Yes, it will be pretty exciting. But yeah, so as far as the topic of fair play, I think that kind of what we've discussed today, obviously the move for Riot, they are looking at is in the best interest of the game in the long haul. Hopefully they're going to be making some additional moves to kind of shore up the deficiency it's going to cause in the professional scene. But, you know, that itself, you know, should hopefully only be good for the future of the game in creating a even playing field for everybody across, and maybe giving people a chance to rise when normally they weren't before in there. Maybe they just couldn't adjust to their own particular ping or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out in gameplay for both the average player and the professional player.
Yeah, definitely.
But that's really the run of the topics we had for today. We kind of blazed through those faster than I thought we would. But yeah, I mean, yes, we were quite efficient today. So you guys got your 10-ton talks today in a bite-sized chunk. So, but as for next week, as for me writing, I'm going to be doing more column. Kind of hitting my gravity well as I usually do. I do know today, as far as I know, Snipe Hunter, we kind of talked about last week whether Revival's client would be going up. It should be going up today. So that's a little. Nice. If you're watching the show, one of the few people, dedicated audience members here, the Revival client, the first edition of it will be going up tonight. So check your email boxes if you're following that game. So I'll be writing about that, I'm sure, next week, and I'm also going to dabble into some other interesting games. I've kind of been preying on some emails, news emails that we've been getting, and I've been kind of getting some review codes for things. So I'm gonna duck into some really interesting off-the-wall games. One called Scraps, where it's kind of like Twisted Metal, but it's this really creative sandboxy version of just make cars that blow each other up and run around and kill each other. So I'm going to be doing some of that this weekend, and I'll be writing about that. But that's kind of what it's looking like for me for next week. But definitely check out the site. I may surprise you with something else. So go check out 10tonhammer.com. Lots of good stuff. We have a lot of other good authors that they're very busy, especially on Fridays, so we're trying to get them on for you. But as soon as we get more of them, you guys are going to get a chance to see them, get to know them a little bit more, and enjoy new content from them besides just the awesome written content everybody's doing. So, but that's it as far as what to expect on the show, or on the show next week, and written content for next week. Jeremy, did you have anything other than your regular coverage of event schedules?
It's been the main thing. Again, we're still going hard on our Cures of the Storm guide coverage, making sure that those are as appealing visually as they can be, and making sure everything's up to date there. Other than that, yeah, I mean, it's one of the, I guess, exciting things about covering esports is that I'm really in the moment all the time. So it just really depends on what comes up. Some days there'll just be a few things, and then some days it seems like the whole world is falling. So makes it always interesting for sure. But yeah, definitely check out our coverage there. Also, if you do want to support us and the people who help us do what we do, aside from going to 10tonhammer.com, which we definitely encourage, also, if you so choose, if you feel like it's something you really want to help support, the best way you can support us is going to patreon.com/10tonhammer, and really support us through there. We try to give back as much as we can. Give you guys cool stuff if you do choose to support us. So if you're enjoying the show, if you're enjoying the content we provide, definitely check that out, because it'll help us keep doing it for as long as possible. Other than that, keep checking us each Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time for 10 Ton Talks.
Yep, and if you just tuned in late, or you're watching this on YouTube, well, you know that you can find it on YouTube then, and also Twitch. We do it live, like Jeremy said, but there are replays available on Twitch as well too. So either place you can find it. Watch shows, past episodes. Like I said, we had the guest developer last week. It was a pretty good episode. So definitely you can check out the replay there on Twitch, and I believe I already sent it to YouTube as well, so it should be there in both places. But that's where you can find us if we're not here live. So check us out there, and we want to thank you guys all again for coming for another episode. We will see you next week.
See you then.